Hey, hope everybody's having a good evening. We are on, Wednesday, midweek? Yep, Wednesday, June 14th, and we've had a little bit of cumulus tropical moisture coming up from the south, and not much rain out of this stuff. And just to give you a quick look what it looks like outside right now, bringing up the Scorpion Cam, and I call this the Scorpion Cam because that's the camera is right at where there's kind of like a nighttime nest of a few of them. Looking clear there. I mean, we're not getting overrun by scorpions or anything like that, but I like to add a little novelty to some of the equipment there, so that's what we're looking at. And good news also, got the live cam up, so scrambled to get this up in the last 20 minutes, but here it is. And I wanted to thank some of you all. Let me see if I can bring up the window here. I went carefully through my Patreon donations because, you know, we're getting up to like the beginning of the month, and that's when I like looking at that. And I do see that Alexi, I got your donation there. Burl Henry, of course, and a few others in here. Thomas Fortner, Kevin McKinney. These are donations mostly from April and May that just kind of got lost in my list here, but I've got everything all straightened out here. And I've got a new one from, let's see here, John Huntington. No, John Huntington did. There was, yeah, it's in my notes here. Let me hang on a second. The last 30 minutes before we do the webcast, everything is kind of like chaos here. My notebook is way over there. Micah O'Neill, new donation today. I appreciate that. And that's the only new donation we've had in June, except for Justin Pulliam. So if any of you want to contribute to the channel, that is much appreciated. And I will tell you now that that is a big morale booster, because I like to have the channel being self-sufficient, doing its own thing, and not sucking money out of my electric bills and book printing costs and all that other stuff. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate that. And when I said yesterday that we only had 2 donations since April 7th, I think I said that 2 days ago, I meant there was only 2 new Patreon donations since then, two new people coming on. And as I said, I found a couple others in here too. So I'm gradually getting this all straightened out, and I do appreciate that. And I will let you know that when we get into our next big moderate risk, I am going to make that worthwhile. I'm going to put on a private stream running probably for about 2 or 3 hours. We'll do hand analysis and stuff like that, and only the Patreon donors will get the notification of that private stream, so you'll be able to check that out. All right, so anyway, enough of this groveling for money, and we'll get right into the forecast here. Here's our look at what's happening across Texas. Looks like we've got some new activity out in the Midland, La Mesa, and Snyder area. Not too surprising, because we do have the Gulf wide open. There's a southerly flow coming up from the Gulf, and we've got the dry line in place pretty much right along the cap rock there, and we'll see if we can find it on the SPC dew point plot. Okay, so that's coming up there. And while you look at that, let me take a look at the chat, make sure there's no big problems with the stream. Looks good. See, we got Andrew here in Funwood Tech, John Booma, Eddie W., Kevin McKinney, and Alexi. And I haven't seen Ahmed on in about a week. Usually I see that Arabic in there, and wonder what happened to him. I guess he'll be back soon. David Holcomb made it to a live session finally. Alexi here, Eddie W. says 2 lines of storms with much needed rain in Iowa. And we can see that up there. Nothing severe, but lots of trees down. Yeah, there has been a lot of wind damage up in Wisconsin, all the way down to Iowa, kind of in this area here. And we were seeing a little bit of a derecho going through the Green Bay area, a couple tornado warnings out for that region. And those storms have crossed over across Lake Michigan, now moving into western Michigan there. Lloyd McCarter says idle time in North Little Rock, watching storms in the Big Bend and central Louisiana. Occasional thunderstorms there with Sue M there in Indiana. Sue M doesn't like how I must give passwords to give Patreon. Not too sure I understand, but if you have a concern, just email me, and you can always send PayPal, or we can work out something else if you don't like Patreon, which is fine. Metro at Chicago's Metro Rail Transit stopped an entire line BNSF to Aurora due to the weather around 5:45. From John Buma. Burl H. saying howdy. Sarah Wood, under a severe thunderstorm warning till 10 p.m., had a few severe thunderstorms. Things starting to quiet down. Ryan there in Florida, dealing with rain. Apocalypse Part 2 in South Florida. And Andrew in Peoria lost power for about 2 hours this afternoon. Okay, about the only other new thing here, I don't know if you can hear it, but I've got a window unit going in the background about 15 feet away. We're getting up towards 90 degrees, and I can't run the webcast without cooling now, especially with these lights. So I'm going to have to run a little bit of white noise in the background for these webcasts for the next few weeks, I think. Okay, slight risk all the way up and down the Great Plains from about Missouri down to West Texas there. So that's kind of coincided there with the dry line. And then we go up a little bit further north, and we've got that Bear Clinic system up in the Great Lakes. Looks like SPC has decided not to go with any any significant severe weather on that. So I guess we're lacking some ingredients there. And typically that's going to be instability. So let's check out the charts. Going up to 250 millibars, the hemispheric chart for Canada. Got ridging across North America here. So that would be the long wave ridge, and embedded in that, we've got a trough and a major shortwave ridge from Lake Superior up to northern Manitoba. So in between, from the upstream trough to the downstream ridge, that's where we look for destabilization of the air mass and lift, especially along the jet axis, which we can see this morning running from about Minneapolis up to about Pickle Lake right there. So right there, that's where the polar front jet is located. And do we see any evidence of the subtropical jet? Yeah, absolutely, way down here. And here's a better look at that. We'll go up to 200 millibars. So instead of looking at 34,000 feet, we're looking at about 39. This is the 200 millibar chart here. So this is going to show the subtropical jet a little bit better there. Polar front jet running from Oregon to Wyoming, kind of in this area right there. And you see the leading edge of it right there around Omaha, 65 knots there. And then we have the anticyclonic subtropical jet down in Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona. So that's definitely going to help out with storm organization a bit, with those storms we have out near Midland. Those may keep things going a little bit after dark. We can see a little bit of a ridge right here that's probably helping us suppress things along the Louisiana coast right there. 500 millibars shows the subtropical jet evaporating at that level. That's pretty typical, but we do see the polar front jet up to the north. And it looks like the upper level winds are not all that strong. That's probably why we don't have a slight risk up in that area, probably due to limited upper level flow, only about 30-35 knots there. 700 millibars, yeah, we're getting about 30 knots through here. Okay, and then as far as capping, 10 Celsius is a good discriminator for the cap. So that's going to run something like this. There's the 10 Celsius line. So anything within that is going to indicate very strong capping. And you can see the peak of that, 15 at Midland and then 13 at Oklahoma City. So obviously we did break that there in Midland. Sorry, this is off the bottom of the screen. We did break that at Midland, and that's probably just due to the very strong heating in that region. And we can take a look at the skew-t. We'll do that real quick while that's on our minds here. This is the Midland sounding for this morning. 700 millibars showing 16 Celsius. Yeah, that's the very strong cap. So probably what we had is some very good tropical moisture underneath there. And then very strong heating, say we get 100 degrees at the surface. That's 100 right there. That might be enough to break the cap, but lots of dry air just off the surface, so that's going to be a big problem for the storms in that region. So maybe a lot of elevated type convection, but above that, definitely some very good cape. And that looks like maybe about 3,000 or 4,000 cape there. Up in Illinois, let's check out what the soundings look like in that area. We'll go to Lincoln, ILX, I think that's Lincoln, Central Illinois in any case. Okay, we've got a 20Z sounding. That's kind of interesting. I think I want to go to the 12Z though, kind of see how things started out earlier this afternoon. And there we go. There's Lincoln coming up. So this is a 12Z, and we can see that there is abundant moisture in the low levels, especially from the surface up to about 6,000 or 7,000 feet. And not very much capping either. Very little capping, so that tells us widespread cells. And if we do a mixed layer method here, and maybe go with 86, 87 degrees, we're going to get a plot kind of like that there, and then our parcel lift above that, above the LCL, is going to go like this. So a little bit of cape in there. That's going to be about 1,000 to 1,500, and just a little bit of capping, enough to kind of keep things suppressed until the afternoon hours. So this is very conducive to thunderstorms, some widespread storms, but not very strong capping like what we see here in the Great Plains. And then you can see down here, southwest winds at 20, feeding that moisture up from Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. We can see that a little bit better on the low-level charts. And I'm going to bring up the SPC chart since they do show us the dew point. Okay, so we're looking at this morning. This is 925 millibars. This is up at about 2,500 feet. And we can see a little bit of a low-level jet. 35 knots there at Fort Worth. 35 at Oklahoma City. Only 5 there at Topeka, but 30 in Illinois, so maybe a little bit of a low-level jet in place right through there, bringing the moisture northward. And then we can look at the actual dew point values. We have 19 at Oklahoma City. That's going to be about a 66 degree dew point. A little bit weaker in Little Rock. Weaker as you go west because this is recycled air. that's come from the Carolinas there. And what we have in Texas, this is deeper. That's a deeper fetch of trajectory coming from the south. So this brings up 19, 20, 18 there at Lincoln. So that's your moisture axis right there, and that's what's helped to feed the storms. The main negative that I see on this chart here is the veered flow. You can see winds here are about 230 at 25 to 30 knots. That veered flow, that's not really what we want to see. Well, that can give you a little bit of storm relative helicity in the lowest kilometer. So to a certain extent that can help, but when I see this at 925 and 850, that associates, I have an association with that with moisture erosion. So that tells me that there's probably a lot of dry westerlies working their way west to east across the top of the air mass. Let's look at the satellite photo real quick. There's the latest visible coming up here. And I shouldn't say the latest, because the latest frame here we have is 42 after, so I'm going to do a quick refresh on this. Starting to get dark there in Illinois, Indiana, with the sun going down. But we can see this MCS coming together here in the Quincy, Illinois area, out to northeastern Missouri. And I think that's going to be the start of an MCS. We looked at that yesterday on the models. It looked like we were going to see some sort of MCS move southward overnight. So probably St. Louis under the gun for tonight. And it certainly looks like that's propagating somewhat to the south. And then out over Michigan, we can see the remnants of that old MCS moving eastward. And then we have the tail end of the storms over the Indianapolis area right there. We'll see if we can see that on shear level 2. We're looking at the Joliet radar. And most of what we have over Indiana looks like, this looks like anvil debris. Only a few good cells here over the Grand Rapids area. Looks like maybe they're losing a little bit of the low-level moisture. Let me bring up digital atmosphere here, get some current data. I had digital atmosphere running all night, so no surprise that it crashed there. I was messing around with that in the compiler. So let me get that restarted here. Okay, new data coming up. 1Z, we're getting the latest surface data. So, yeah, I guess we'll start with Alaska, see what's going on up there. Here come the plots. 70s, lots of 70s there. But look at those dew points, very dry air, 20s dew points. So it looks like the source region, good grief, even 15, I think that's as low as I've ever seen in the summertime in the Yukon and Alaska. So obviously the trajectory has come from the interior regions and worked its way westward there. But with definitely some modification there, strong heating over Alaska there, and probably some subsidence going on. Northern Canada, 30s, this is pretty characteristic of summer. We go to the south and we start picking up the baroclinic low. You can see that right over the Winnipeg area right here. And looks like maybe the warm front from north of International Falls. Kind of looking around here. Yeah, probably something like that. That's kind of my first guess there for the warm front. And man, look at that lake breeze coming off Duluth there, right? We got 55 with fog there, contrasting with 74 here near Ontonagon, or whatever town that is. Okay, then further south, let's look along the cold front. We can see drier air filtering in from the Dakotas into Minnesota. And looks like maybe the leading edge is running something like that right there. So on the east side, 70s, very high dew points out in this area, and then on the other side we have the cooler, drier air filtering in from the Dakotas. So we were going to look at the tropical air mass up in the Illinois, Missouri area, and since we're looking for maybe an MCS later tonight, we want to kind of get acquainted with that air mass. So let me draw out the front real quick. There's our front. Where's the dry line? Looks like that's along the Cap Rock way over here, helping to get those storms near Midland and Snyder, La Mesa going. Okay, so definitely dry line storms out there. And you can see the intense heating there, 100 degrees there. Well, that's off the screen, but it's down there near Carlsbad. And then the actual moisture axis itself. Let's see here. Moisture axis, I can see 75 in Mississippi. Looks like 76 in Little Rock. That's pretty good moisture there. And looks like maybe 74 out here in Chanute. And that's what you might want to do when you're analyzing, looking for an MCS to be coming through. Work up a dew point analysis, plot out your isotherms, work out your moisture axes, and look at your storm relative inflow into the MCS. Your best, in fact, when we're talking about derecho storms, which are the worst of the MCSs, storm relative inflow is really amped up on those things. Okay, and also we see outflow. See this convergence zone right here? Northeasterly flow coming from Indianapolis through Champaign, through Terre Haute, in contrasting with the moist flow from the south right there. So, depending on if we have upper level support, this could be an area for redevelopment later on. So, this is basically the process here of surface analysis and mesoanalysis and putting things together and making sense out of everything we're seeing here on the plots. Okay. So let's keep things moving along here. Seeing a little bit of dry air aloft here over Oklahoma, North Texas. You see this orange area? That means when we look at soundings in this area, we're going to see some dry air aloft, and that can help increase the severity of storms in that area. When you have dry mid-level conditions, that can accelerate your downburst, for example. Let me go to the soundings here. And we'll try bringing up a sounding there for Oklahoma City. Yeah, look at that dry air, above 500 millibars. Quite a bit of it right there. And we will probably see something similar at Springfield. A little bit of dry air above that. So that's one way you can use the water vapor to see what's going on aloft. Okay, let's finish this out here. I did want to look briefly at the Aqua and Terra imagery, because this is what was happening earlier today. And you can see the tropical air mass over Illinois here. And I'll put up the state lines. Okay, so you can see Illinois right there. And we can see the cloud streets. So this is the flow of tropical air moving from southwest to northeast right there. So earlier in the day when we're going through the charts, we're going to be looking for boundaries. So this here could be a potential boundary. We would want to look at the surface data. It definitely looks like boundaries here. Okay, so that could be an area that has kind of evolved during the afternoon, and maybe we've seen redevelopment along that. And then the actual front is located way back here. And the air mass looks very disrupted from the MCSs that have moved through this area over the past day or two. And I think we pretty much have to go to western Illinois to find the boundaries. So maybe earlier today, something in this area right here. Or possibly right here. And then out in Midland, you can see we don't see the dry line out in that area. Very dry air mass. You can see around Mount Davis, some storms trying to get going there. But can't find the dry line using strictly satellite data. We have to use surface data. And you can really see the cap rock plain as day. See that right there? And this is Palo Duro Canyon, southeast of Amarillo. So you can see a lot of the terrain in there. And believe it or not, there's an actual backside to the cap rock over in New Mexico, and that's located way back here. So if you're on I-40 and you're driving through this area, you will see Canyonland out in this area. And the next thing you know, you'll be on flat farmland through here. Okay, so that's a little geography lesson there. We'll just go ahead and move on here and look at the forecast. Let me find my place. I've got like 30 windows open. Yeah, look what happens when I try to shut down the windows. You're about to close 29 tabs. I've got a lot of windows open here. All right, so let's see here. Let's check out the high-resolution rapid refresh forecast for the rest of the night. Obviously, it's not going to have a really good handle on the details because we've got a very complex pattern of boundaries this evening, but we can look at the overall pattern, and it should pretty much nail that. And we see the stuff in Michigan kind of falling apart. And why is that? Let's take a look up there. Going up to Michigan. Well, we've got one little spot here of 81 over 68, but for the most part, looks like cool conditions. Except for that one area, I guess that's Ann Arbor or something like that. I'm not too familiar, but lots of 60s and 70s and dew points in the 50s in that area, so not really the best air mass for thunderstorms in that area. But the real action is going to be to the south, and it looks like overnight we're going to have this MCS kind of spreading southward. This is going to be about midnight, moving through the St. Louis area, Kansas City, into Evansville, and maybe to Dayton. And there you can see the leading edge of that outflow right there. This is about 2 in the morning. And that'll continue pushing south as long as there is good storm relative inflow. It's definitely tracking toward the moisture source, that's for sure. So we could see that start regenerating tomorrow, even further south. And I'll take a look at the NAM3 and we'll see if there's any possibility of that tomorrow. Okay, let me find my place here. Yeah, I figure I'll show you this real quick here. This is the 850 millibar dew point, and every once in a while I show this to you because this is representative of moisture depth. A lot of times people think all you need is to look at the surface dew points, and you just find where high dew points are located, and that's where your storms are. It's not quite that simple, because there's a vertical component, and that's depth. And let me go back to the skew-t's. And you can see here we've got some pretty good depth here at Lincoln, but in other places we may not have very much depth. For example, maybe Dodge City along the dry line. Well, they're west of the dry line. Let me try Norman. Let me try to find something here. Wow, that's dry. That's Amarillo this morning, or this evening. Very strong lapse rates right there at Amarillo. I'm trying to find you an example of very shallow moisture. Problem is we're starting to pick up the evening soundings here, so not much luck there. But anyway, sometimes you will find moisture with a very limited depth. And 850 will kind of root that out and find where you have very shallow conditions. So this is the 850 millibar dew point, and we can see that the deeper moisture is present. Okay, there's the current chart, pretty much all the way from Texas all the way up to Missouri and up to northeastern Iowa. So that is your deep moisture. These are 60s dew points, and in this region right here, this is mid-60s dew points set up at 850. So this is very deep, very rich moisture. So we have that MCS kind of moving southward overnight. There's the potential for that to link up with this moisture axis here and continue moving southward. Depends on how much capping we have, how much upper level support there is, but there's potential for that to continue southward. So that's kind of what I'm looking for on the NAM. And let me take a quick look at the forecast on the 3 kilometer NAM. And we'll see what that model is going for tomorrow. Okay, so we start out right now, and you can see the MCS over northern Missouri, around the Chicago area, and now we're looking at the trend for that to move southward overnight, and you can see that on its way through Indianapolis around midnight, through Springfield and Chanute, Kansas, and it looks like that does continue southward by around dawn, around Fort Smith, coming up on Little Rock, almost to Memphis, and almost to Fort Campbell there. MCSs do tend to shut down after dawn, but it looks like this one kind of keeps going. A little fragment of it going right there along that moisture axis right there in Arkansas. And then we look for redevelopment later during the afternoon. The NAM is thinking no redevelopment along that boundary, but we've got to keep that in the back of our mind. There could be a boundary there tomorrow, and we could see development along that. But along the tail end, looks like something does get going in northern Oklahoma, around the Pratt area, Pratt, Kansas, tomorrow evening, and that moves southeastward. So it looks like maybe an MCS there for Oklahoma tomorrow night. Okay. So before we head into the bulk of the models, let me take a look at the chat here. And I probably can't go through all of this here, but let's see here. Ryan says the minor disturbance below the Yucatan Peninsula expected to come together the next few days with a 20% chance of further development. That may be that tropical system we were looking at in the Gulf, maybe about a week from now. Thunderstorm overhead where Sue-M is playing with electricity, may need to bail. Greg Schultz was close to 3,000 Cape. Didn't have enough shear for tornadoes. Ancient Astronaut reports 88 degrees there at Canyon Lake. Flights are a mess out of Midway at the moment. Sue-M says those red spots are over me. Storm really fell apart once it hit Lake Michigan there, according to Greg. Ryan saw the same thing there. Sue-M looking for a stormy night there along the northeast end of that MCS. Wisconsin and Illinois pretty much sledgehammered between 2 to 5 p.m. today from Ryan. Ron Chalfant greeting us from Southern California. Downpour over Sue-M in Indiana. And Andrew asks, why do MCSs tend to shut down after dawn? That might be a good topic. We could probably cover MCSs sometime in the next week or two. Mostly it's because we lose the surface heating, and then after dawn we lose the low-level jet as well. We tend to get the mixing going on, and that falls apart, and that's part of the storm inflow. So by the time 11 a.m. rolls around, there's not much to support MCSs. I mean, they can still happen, but statistically, the overnight hours are the best time for those to continue during the summer months. Okay, let's see here. We'll go to the GFS dew point. I think this is a good starting point. For tomorrow evening, there's Thursday evening. We see plenty of moisture working its way northward. A few 70s dew points in northeastern Oklahoma. And we've got cyclonic flow in Oklahoma and Kansas here. See that baroclinic low right there in western Kansas? Probably a combination of a thermal low, baroclinic low. Probably maybe a little bit of a cold front like that I would expect, and then maybe a bit of a warm front maybe in this area here. Maybe that old outflow boundary through Arkansas. So in any case, you can see the nose of the moisture up in the I-70 area of Kansas, up around Pratt, Great Bend, Russell. That looks to be a good chase area for tomorrow. And also maybe some possibilities further down the dry line towards maybe Wellington, Shamrock, Childress. And looks like the dry line runs through about Abilene towards the San Antonio area. See, we got very weak dew points just west of that. Okay, then heading into Friday, probably a low-level jet night. And then Friday evening, still got good cyclonic flow on the Great Plains, bringing the moisture northward. We don't quite know where the mesoscale boundaries are going to be on Friday. That's 54 hours out. But this looks interesting here. Looks like maybe kind of a larger mesoscale low pressure area over the Lubbock area, and that would bring some cyclonic flow, a little bit of upslope to western Oklahoma. So maybe that was some lift along the Caprock, may get storms going around Gage to Wheeler County, Canadian, maybe somewhere in that area. We'll keep an eye on that. You can see this back southeast flow right there in the Red River counties. And moisture also returning back to Iowa and Illinois, so there may be some opportunities up in this area here. Then for Saturday, new cold front coming southward. Dry line will be active, and looks like that pushes off the Caprock a little bit further east than usual, maybe to the I-35 corridor. So maybe a chance for storms around Oklahoma City, possibly down to Wichita Falls and up to the triple point around Pratt. And then the intersection of the moisture, that looks to be up in the Salina area. So probably a very good storm day there for Kansas on Saturday. For Sunday, that front is going to drive southward. So maybe stalling out right there around the Red River of Texas. You can see high pressure there in Nebraska and Kansas, driving that cold air south, and upslope in the Lubbock area right there. So maybe a few good storms around the Childress, Turkey, and Dickens area. And then dry line active along I-35 once again. We'll have to take a look at the upper level flow on, let me see what it's doing on Sunday here. Because if we have strong upper level flow on Sunday, that's probably going to help get severe weather going. Looks kind of weak. See that right there? That's Sunday evening. The stronger polar front jet well to the north. No help from the subtropical jet. That's all the way down in Florida. So we're just relying on this little fringe of 20s and 30s winds aloft. So this is telling me the cold air coming down from Kansas and Oklahoma probably very shallow and not having much of an impact on thickness aloft. Okay, so back to the charts. Okay, so shallow cold front coming south. Probably will be a few storms, but we'll probably be talking about maybe an enhanced SPC risk up to maybe slight at best. Return flow starting to come up for Monday and Tuesday. And you can see a little bit of cyclonic flow in the Gulf. Let me see if I can pull that up here. Yeah, you see that right there by the Yucatan. We'll have to keep an eye on that. That could work its way up into the Texas area. So Wednesday and Thursday, it's like whatever that is in the Gulf makes it onto the Mexican coast. It's kind of consistent with what the models were showing yesterday. Low pressure in western Kansas right there, maybe a little bit of a warm front in Oklahoma. So storm chance is probably persisting. This is on Thursday. Let me see what the upper level winds are doing. Bringing it up to Thursday. Stronger flow, looks like still well to the north. So, yeah, looks like continued very shallow air mass in this region. Best baroclinicity well up to the north in this area here. But it does look like we have a boundary kind of shifting slowly southward during the last half of next week. So I think at some point we will probably squeak some severe weather out of this, including in this upslope area here in New Mexico. This looks very interesting. Looks like whatever that is out in the Gulf of Mexico starts breaking up, and we start bringing the moisture back northward a little bit. On Friday, this is the 23rd. And now we develop kind of an upslope day in Texas here around Saturday, the 24th. And then strong return flow into the Great Plains toward the 25th and 26th. And one new chart that I wanted to show is the precipitable water for the continent. Let's see what this is doing. Okay, so starting out right now, best precipitable water, of course, out in the Caribbean, but we're getting a little bit of that deeper moisture all the way up into Indiana and Illinois. And then you can see the wraparound around that baroclinic system in Manitoba. And also you'll note the very dry conditions in Arizona and New Mexico. So we're definitely not into monsoon season just yet. Monsoon pattern well to the south. Okay, so we'll run this forward for the next few days. Looks like we get a little bit of an increase of moisture in Oklahoma and eastern Kansas. Things still dry in Arizona and New Mexico. And not a whole lot of moisture on the plains itself. We're limited to like 1 to 1.5 inches precipitable water. But the moisture stuff, this is starting to approach the Gulf of Mexico right there from the Caribbean. You can see that spot there of 2.5 inches over western Cuba. This is on the weekend. And you see how that starts moving northward. So we could see rain chances starting to go up for Florida there towards the 21st, 22nd. In that low pressure area out there in the western Gulf, that's going to keep that deeper precipitable water kind of trapped out in this area, at least briefly. And then looks like some of it starts to make it up towards Texas later in the period, around the 25th and 26th. Now you see it coming on shore right there. That's late in the month right there. So that could be a very rainy pattern set up for the last week of June. And you can see things starting to moisten up in Arizona. Start of the monsoon season, maybe an early start. Let me go back. You can see how dry it is right there. And then later on you see some moisture starting to feed up into southern Arizona and New Mexico there towards the end. Okay, that's about all I got here. Andrew says, great, thanks for that answer, Tim. Greg is ready for a break from severe weather for a few days, even though he loves watching it. Ancient Astronaut says, night all. Ryan thinks that translates to a slow June as well. More rain inbound for Ryan. Had severe storms this morning roll over him. End up another 3 to 4 inches. Made for an interesting rush hour with the flooding. All right. I think that's about all I got. So I appreciate you watching, and maybe join us tomorrow night. And have a good evening. And we'll see you then. Take care.